It started with a sign. Just 5 words scrawled in black marker on a piece of cardboard. $5 for the beast. That's all it said. No explanation, no appeal, just a price. A cold, hard number slapped onto a living, breathing creature like he was nothing more than junk to be sold off. And behind that sign, an old German shepherd. Thin, scarred, one ear bent at a strange angle, ribs pressing against his dull, matted fur. He sat quietly, chained to the sidewalk, eyes tired but alert, watching the world pass by without blinking. It was a hot summer afternoon in Clearbrook, Montana. The kind of day where the sun hangs heavy in the sky, baking the pavement, making the air shimmer like water. Officer Ethan Miller walked down Main Street with his 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. It was one of their rare days off together, just father and daughter. No calls, no emergencies, just peace. Ethan was a man who carried silence in his eyes. Tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray at his temples and a face that had seen too much. He worked the beat in a small-town police force, steady, reliable, always doing the right thing. But inside, he was tired, not just from the job, from life, from a marriage that ended in quiet pain, from nights spent alone wondering if he was enough. Sophie, she was the opposite, bright, curious, full of life. Her blonde hair bounced in a messy ponytail, her yellow sundress already dusty from skipping ahead. She saw the world in color even when it tried to stay gray. Then she saw the dog. She stopped, tugged her dad's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, voice trembling, "look at him." Ethan followed her gaze. He saw the same thing everyone else probably saw, a worn-out animal, probably dangerous, definitely not worth the trouble. He'd seen dogs like this before, strays, abused, forgotten. Most of the time, there wasn't much he could do. "We don't know him, sweetheart," Ethan said gently. "He could be sick. Aggressive, we already have enough on our plate." But Sophie wasn't listening. She crouched down right there on the sidewalk and looked into the dog's eyes, and something happened. The street faded, the cars, the heat, the noise, it all disappeared. In that moment, it was just her and the dog, no words, no sounds, just a look, a connection. She turned to her dad, tears welling up. "Please, Daddy, he needs us. We can't just leave him here." Ethan hesitated. He didn't want another responsibility. Another problem, another thing that could break his heart. But then he looked at the dog, and the dog looked back, not with fear, not with anger, with dignity, like he still had pride even after everything. And something inside Ethan cracked. He pulled out his wallet, took out a $5 bill, handed it to the man sitting beside the dog, a scruffy, hollow-eyed guy named Harold Boone. Harold snatched the money, stuffed it in his pocket, muttered something under his breath, and walked away fast. Like he couldn't get out of there quick enough. Ethan frowned. That bothered him. People don't just give up a dog for $5 and disappear without a second thought. Not unless they're hiding something, but Sophie didn't care about any of that. She was already kneeling beside the dog, gently stroking his fur. "We're going to take care of you now," she whispered. "You're safe." The dog didn't bark, didn't flinch, just let out a soft sigh, like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. "What should we call him, Daddy?" Sophie asked, eyes shining. Ethan crouched beside her, looked at the scars, the limp. The way the dog held himself, calm, alert, like he'd been trained. "We'll think of something," he said, and just like that the dog had a name. Bruno. The morning after brought something new. Sunlight spilled across the backyard like melted gold. Dew clung to the grass. Birds chirped in the trees, and in the middle of it all, Bruno. He lay stretched out on the patio, one paw twitching in a dream, his breathing slow and steady. For the first time since Ethan could remember, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full. Sophie was already up. She stood barefoot on the grass, wearing an oversized t-shirt with faded unicorns and pink bike shorts. Her hair was tied into 2 messy pigtails, and a pink towel hung over her shoulder. In her hands, a bottle of dog shampoo and a blue bucket filled with warm water. She had been up since sunrise, determined. This wasn't just a bath, this was a welcome. Ethan stepped out onto the back porch, coffee in hand, watching his daughter kneel beside the old German shepherd. Bruno didn't flinch, didn't growl, just lifted his head slightly like he understood what was about to happen. "Ready, Bruno?" Sophie whispered. The dog blinked. That was all, but it was enough. Ethan joined them, crouching beside his daughter. "Need help?" he asked. Sophie nodded. "Hold his head still." "I don't want soap in his eyes." Ethan gently cupped his hands around Bruno's broad skull. The fur was coarse, matted in places, still thick with grime. Sophie squeezed the shampoo and white foam swirled across Bruno's back. As she worked, her fingers slowed. "Daddy," she said softly, "come look." Ethan leaned in. Beneath the suds circling Bruno's neck like a ghost was a deep, hairless groove. The skin was raised, scarred like something had been wrapped around him for too long, too tight. "A collar?" Sophie asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Or a chain?" They rinsed him, towel dried him, and with each layer of dirt washed away, more scars appeared, thin lines across his ribs, a missing patch of fur near his tail. His back right leg clearly injured, old fracture never properly healed. He favored it with every step. Sophie's eyes welled up. "Who would do this to a dog?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He ran a hand over Bruno's head, feeling the slight tremble beneath the skin. "Some people," he said quietly, "shouldn't be allowed near animals." Sophie frowned. "Do you think he was a police dog or a soldier's dog?" Ethan studied Bruno's posture, alert, calm, disciplined, even in pain. "Could be," he said. "He moves like he was trained." Bruno sneezed once, then looked up at Sophie as if he'd heard every word. She smiled, wrapping her arms gently around his neck. "He's not just a dog," she whispered. "He's a survivor." That afternoon, they sat on the porch together. Ethan read the newspaper. Sophie flipped through her sketchbook, drawing pictures of Bruno, his face, his paws, the way he rested his head on her lap. Bruno lay sprawled beside her, breathing slow and deep. Every now and then, Sophie would talk to him, telling him about school, her favorite ice cream flavor, and about her mom. "She left when I was 6, she said, scratching behind Bruno's ear. "It was just a regular day, and she didn't come back. Daddy says it's complicated. But I think she just didn't love me enough." Bruno shifted his head onto her lap. Sophie looked down at him, eyes wide. "But it's okay. I have Daddy, and now I have you." Ethan heard every word. His hand stilled on the newspaper. He didn't speak, just watched as Bruno thumped his tail faintly against the porch floor, then barking, sharp, angry, from across the fence. Rufus, the neighbor's massive black mastiff, lunged at the wooden boards, snarling, slamming his weight against them. Sophie startled. Her pencils scattered. Bruno jerked upright. In one motion he pushed himself up, limped down the steps, and planted himself between Sophie and the fence. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood firm, still, tail stiff, drawing a line. Rufus barked again. Bruno didn't move. One more time Rufus snarled, then stopped. Silence fell. The mastiff slunk away. Ethan blinked. "Well, I'll be damned," Sophie grinned. "He protected me." Bruno turned his head slightly, checking Sophie was safe, then slowly lowered himself to the grass with a groan. Ethan knelt beside him. "That took guts," he murmured, rubbing the dog's chest. "You may be old, but you've still got it." That night, as Ethan tucked Sophie into bed, she clutched her stuffed bunny and whispered, "Can he sleep in my room?" Ethan hesitated. Bruno was old. What if he growled in his sleep? What if he snapped from pain? But then he saw Sophie's eyes, hopeful, trusting. And he saw Bruno already limping toward the door as if he'd understood. "All right," Ethan said, "but only if he stays on the rug." Bruno circled twice beside her bed, then collapsed with a sigh. Sophie reached down, brushed his fur. "Good night, Bruno." And for the first time in a long time, the house felt full. Then just past 2:00 a.m., Ethan woke, claws scratching against hardwood. A low, guttural growl. He sat up, reached for his flashlight, moved quietly down the hall. Bruno was in the kitchen, pacing near the back door. Ears alert, tail stiff, every muscle pointing toward something outside. When Ethan opened the door, Bruno surged forward, not with the wobble of an old dog, with speed, precision. Ethan grabbed his jacket and followed, flashlight beam cutting through the mist, crickets silent, boots crunching gravel. They passed the abandoned railroad tracks, moved into the old industrial zone, rusted warehouses, condemned lots. Bruno stopped in front of a collapsed chain-link fence. Behind it, Lot 16, an old shipping depot overtaken by weeds and shadows. Bruno whined, pushed his nose into a gap. Ethan crawled through after him. Inside, dirt, sawdust, something darker. Rows of old kennels lined the far wall, most empty, doors hanging open, a few still locked. One held a faded dog tag, Juno, another a torn blanket stained with dried blood. Ethan touched the edge of a rusted cage. It wobbled, revealing deep scratch marks carved into the floor beneath. Then a click. Ethan turned fast, hand on his revolver. Behind a wall of crates, nothing but evidence: an old desk, a filing cabinet, inside logbooks, names, breeds, weights, dollar amounts. One page stamped in red, X14 hold for pickup. Ethan's stomach turned. He remembered now. 2 years ago, whispers of a dog smuggling ring, strange vans, dogs howling at night. No proof, no resources. He'd let it go. Now guilt settled heavy in his chest. Bruno barked once, sharp. Ethan opened a crate. Empty except for a dirty bowl, a torn nylon leash. On the side, spray painted in black, number 24. This wasn't just someone keeping strays, Ethan muttered. This was organized. Bruno whined again, looked toward the side wall. Beneath a tarp, a rusted cage on wheels, big enough for 4 dogs. The smell was worse here. Ethan didn't want to guess how long it had been since it was used. He took pictures, every cage, every document, every collar. Then he looked at Bruno. "You led me here for a reason," he said. "Did they do this to you?" Bruno didn't answer, but in the silence Ethan felt it. This dog hadn't just wandered into their lives, he had returned. When they got home just before dawn, Sophie was waiting at the door, pajamas on, rubbing her eyes. "Where did you go?" she asked. Ethan knelt beside her. "Bruno took me somewhere, a bad place." Her eyes widened. Was he scared? Ethan looked at Bruno, then back at his daughter. "No," he said softly, "he was brave." Next morning, Ethan couldn't shake the images. Rusted cages, bloodied blankets, names scratched into metal. He sat at his desk, coffee gone cold, papers spread out. Among the documents, a torn envelope. Faint ink, Kennel X14. He typed it into the state database, nothing useful, but it matched a shelter permit number buried in old police files. An abandoned kennel, legitimate once. Owner died, property foreclosed. No one had connected it to anything criminal. Ethan leaned back. Something didn't add up. Why would a criminal ring use a defunct kennel's ID? And why did Bruno lead him straight to it? That evening, Ethan got ready for patrol, slipped into his Navy uniform, strapped on his belt. Bruno sat by the door watching, calm, alert. "Sorry, buddy," Ethan said, patting his head. "Not tonight, gotta handle this one alone." Unbeknownst to him, Sophie watched from the stairs, green hoodie, jeans, sneakers laced, her face determined. Moments later, when Ethan's cruiser pulled away, the side gate creaked open. The sun had nearly set when Ethan parked near Route 7. Scouting the creek bridges, found nothing. Meanwhile, Sophie crept behind trees along the walking trail. She followed on her bike, careful to stay back. She didn't know why, maybe curiosity, maybe fear, but she told herself she'd just stay close. Then go home. Near the 3rd bridge, she heard it, a faint whimper beneath the concrete. She climbed down the embankment. Under the bridge, among leaves and broken crates, a puppy, brown and tan, matted, one eye swollen shut, no older than 4 months. Ribs showing, tail curled tight. Sophie knelt. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered. "I won't hurt you." The puppy didn't move, just stared with tired, frightened eyes. Sophie took off her hoodie, wrapped it around the pup. It trembled against her chest, but didn't resist. Her heart broke. How cold it was, how light it felt. Up on the trail, Ethan called dispatch. Then movement in the trees, a flash of green, a streak of hair, something small in arms. "Sophie," she froze. "Don't be mad," she called out. "I found him under the bridge." Ethan hurried over, pulse spiking. "You followed me, this isn't safe." "I know," she said, chin trembling. "But he was alone, scared, just like Bruno was." Ethan sighed, looked down at the puppy, clearly abused, neglected. No way he could turn it away. They drove home in silence. Sophie cradled the pup the whole way. Back at the house, she named him Buddy, mixed breed, possibly terrier and shepherd, floppy ears, tiny white patch on his chest. Ethan cleaned his wound. Sophie held his paw. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise." Bruno approached, sniffed the air, studied Buddy, then moved closer, gave a gentle nudge to the pup's ear. The puppy whimpered, but didn't shy away. That night, Bruno lay beside him, positioning himself like a guardian. Ethan stood in the hallway, watching. The older dog's protective instincts unmistakable. Something in Ethan softened again. Later, alone at the kitchen table, Ethan pulled out the old envelope, fingers tracing the faded name, Kennel X14. "Buddy's not a coincidence," he murmured. "None of this is." Bruno appeared beside him. "You knew where to take me," Ethan said, staring into the dog's deep eyes. "And now Sophie finds another one dumped like trash." Bruno's ears twitched. He didn't blink. "I'm not letting this go." The days after Buddy's rescue passed in a strange hush, like Clearbrook itself was holding its breath. Ethan couldn't shake the name Kennel X14 from his mind. The deeper he dug, the more it felt like someone had scrubbed the trail clean. No records, no permits, no digital footprint, just silence. And in Ethan's experience, silence didn't mean nothing was happening. It meant someone didn't want you to find it. Late one afternoon, a slip of paper appeared under the windshield of his cruiser. No return address. No signature, just a few words in messy, hurried handwriting. Check the property behind Miller's quarry. South Path. You'll hear them before you see them. Ethan drove out at dusk. No sirens, no uniform, just a black jacket, worn jeans, and the weight of a badge tucked into his belt. Bruno sat in the back seat, alert, still, eyes fixed on the road like he already knew where they were going. The path behind the quarry was narrow, overgrown. Pines closed in on both sides, their branches scraping the roof of the car. Ethan parked beneath a thick grove, engine off, silence pressing in. Bruno was out before the door fully opened. He hit the ground running, nose to the dirt, tail stiff, moving with purpose, not like a dog searching, like one returning. Ethan followed, brushing aside damp branches, boots sinking into soft mud. Then faint at first sounds in the dark. Yelps. Whimpers. The sharp clink of metal chains. Bruno stopped near a boulder, sniffed twice, then veered left, disappearing between the trees. Ethan caught up moments later and froze. Ahead, hidden behind stacked wooden pallets and sagging tarps, was a makeshift compound. Barbed wire coiled around part of the perimeter. Inside, metal kennels stood in rows, some stacked, some chained. Dogs filled them, over a dozen. Some barked weakly. Others lay still, too weak to move. The air stank of rot, of wet fur, of fear. Ethan's stomach turned. Then footsteps. 3 men stepped out from the tree line. The kind who didn't smile unless they meant harm. The one in front, Vince Jargo, stood with arms crossed, sleeves rolled up to reveal tattooed forearms. Mid-40s, black hair, goatee, eyes like cracked glass. Didn't expect company, he said, voice slow, oily. Behind him, 2 others, Luther and Clem Leaner, both sun-worn, rough-handed, the kind who worked with their fists more than tools. Ethan didn't move. You running this? Vince smirked. We're minding our business. Clem stepped forward. These dogs ain't yours, Miller. You don't got a warrant, and you sure as hell don't got backup. Bruno growled low, deep from the chest. He stepped in front of Ethan, body tight, ready. You threatening a cop? Ethan asked, voice steady. Vince tilted his head. No, we're warning a father. Bad things happen when people dig where they shouldn't. A beat of silence. Wind hissed through the trees. Ethan's fingers hovered near his phone. Bruno lunged, just a bark, sharp and sudden. The men flinched. Ethan used the moment to step back, grabbing Bruno's collar. I'll be back, he said, locking eyes with Vince. With a warrant and an army. He turned, walked away, heart pounding, but the threat wasn't empty. And the part that chilled him most, they knew about Sophie. That night, Ethan came home late. Sophie sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, Bruno at her feet, Buddy curled near the fireplace. She didn't speak until Ethan hung up his jacket. I heard them, she whispered. Ethan turned. I followed you, she said. I didn't mean to, I wanted to bring Bruno's blanket, but then I saw everything. Her eyes shimmered. They know about me, don't they? Ethan knelt beside her, took her hands. They do, he said quietly, but I won't let them near you, I promise. Sophie threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. Please don't go back, please, I don't want to lose you too. Ethan held her, tight. Bruno rose slowly, stepping close, resting his head against Sophie's shoulder. No words, just presence, a vow. Later that night, while Ethan sat at the kitchen table, flipping through old case files, Bruno walked in, dropped something at his feet, a rusted keyring, covered in dirt. Ethan picked it up. The tag read, Unit B, Forest Lockers 712X. He looked at Bruno. You're not done showing me things, are you? The storm rolled in just after sundown. Thunder cracked over the rooftops. Rain fell in thick, steady sheets. The whole town went quiet, like it was bracing for what came next. Inside the house, the air was tense. Sophie sat on the edge of the couch, arms wrapped around her knees. Buddy twitched in his sleep. Bruno stood near the door, ears up, muscles tight. Ethan double-checked his gear, badge, flashlight, cuffs, radio, gun. He'd called in a small team, trusted officers. They'd meet him near the quarry, warrant in hand, ready to move. But when he knelt in front of Sophie, he saw fear in her eyes. I don't want to stay home, she said. What if they come here? What if they saw me too? Ethan hesitated. He looked at Bruno, then at his daughter. Sophie had already stepped into this darkness. He couldn't erase that, and truthfully, he didn't trust leaving her behind. All right, he said, but you stay in the car, no exceptions. She nodded fast, eyes bright with relief. They left under a curtain of rain, headlights cut through fog. Bruno rode in the back, silent. Sophie hugged a blanket, staring out the window. They met the team near the woods. Deputy Carla Boone lean, sharp-eyed, calm under pressure. Officer Jordan Tall, quiet, known for his tracking skills. Ethan briefed them fast. Vince Jargo, at least 2 others, dogs in cages, possible weapons. We go quiet, we go fast. Then he looked at Bruno. Find the way. The dog didn't wait. He bounded ahead, leading them through puddles, mud, fallen branches. Confident. Like he'd walked this path 100 times. The compound loomed ahead, half hidden by rain and tarps. Dim light flickered under the awning. Ethan raised his fist. Team split. Carla flanked right, Jordan left. Ethan moved toward the cages. Sophie watched from the car, heart pounding. She'd promised to stay. But then she heard it, a sharp, broken bark. Not Bruno. She was out of the car before she could think. Mud under her feet, rain on her face. She moved past the fence toward the back. One cage held a dog that didn't bark, didn't move, an old female Labrador, fur soaked. Side torn open, eyes half closed. Sophie reached for the latch, rusted but loose. She opened it, dropped to her knees. It's okay, she whispered. I've got you, the dog whimpered, but let Sophie pull her out. Blood stained the blanket, then movement. Clem stepped from the shadows, knife in hand. Ethan saw her. Sophie, get back. But Clem was already running. Ethan sprinted, so did Bruno. But Bruno got there first. He slammed into Clem's leg, jaws locking onto his wrist. The knife clattered to the ground. Clem screamed. Bruno didn't let go, drove him into the mud. Sophie scrambled back, clutching the wounded dog, tears mixing with rain. Jordan and Carla moved in, cuffs ready. Clem and Luther were down in seconds. Vince tried to run. Carla's taser found him before he made it 10 feet. Silence. Then relief. Ethan dropped to his knees beside Sophie. Wrapped both her and the injured dog in his arms. Whispered thanks into her wet hair. Bruno limped over, fur-soaked, muzzle speckled with mud and blood. He sat beside them, chest heaving, eyes on Ethan. You saved us, Ethan said, and Bruno, the old dog no one wanted, lowered his head, resting it gently on Sophie's leg. The storm passed, but the weight of what happened still hung in the air. At the precinct, paperwork piled high. By noon, all 3 men, Clem, Luther, and the man running it all, Joe Carter, were locked up. Ethan stared at the file. Joe Carter, a name he hadn't heard in 6 years. A man he thought had vanished after a string of arrests and shady deals. Now back, harder, colder, more dangerous. Ethan walked to the interview room. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Joe sat at the table, hands cuffed, olive jacket grimy, beard wild, eyes sharp. Here because you owe me a drink, Joe muttered. Or cause you're the only one dumb enough to think this matters. I'm here, Ethan said, because I know what you did. Joe scoffed. I've done a lot of things. Ethan slid a photo across the table, Bruno standing tall beside a rescue truck. Joe's face twitched. Well, I'll be damned, you still got that mutt alive. He's not a mutt, Ethan said. He was a narcotics K-9, trained, loyal. You sold him, chained him, left him broken. Joe shrugged. He got hurt, wasn't worth much after that. No one wants a broken dog. Ethan's voice dropped. He still saved lives, he still protected people after everything you did. Joe sneered. Then you're lucky, but don't act like he's special. He was a tool. Tools wear out. Ethan stood. You don't understand loyalty. That's why you'll never see what he's worth. He walked out before his anger took over. Back home, golden light stretched across the floor. Sophie sat beside Bruno, gently brushing his fur. Buddy curled at their feet. Hope, the injured Labrador, rested nearby, bandaged, breathing steady. Ethan walked in, sat across from her. She looked up. Was it him? She asked. Ethan nodded. Joe Carter, the man who used to own Bruno. Yeah, he used him. When Bruno got hurt, he threw him away. Sophie was silent. Then she wrapped her arms around Bruno's neck. I won't ever let anyone throw you away again, she whispered. Never. Bruno turned his head, resting his chin on her shoulder. Ethan felt something shift inside him, something quiet, deep. The kind of moment when a child takes on pain that isn't hers and turns it into love. Later that night, after tucking Sophie in, Ethan stood in the kitchen, poured a mug of tea. Bruno padded in slower than usual, limp more noticeable. Ethan crouched beside him. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "Better than any officer I've ever worked with." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silver badge-shaped tag. "Found it years ago in storage. Old K9 unit tag, engraved with one word, valor." He fastened it to Bruno's collar. "You earned this a long time ago." Bruno leaned into him, head against Ethan's shoulder. Outside, the moon rose high. Inside, the house felt full, the ghosts of the past finally starting to fade. Summer returned to Clearbrook slowly, like a breath finally released after being held too long. The trees along Main Street grew thick with leaves. Warm wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh-cut grass. Kids rode bikes down quiet streets. Laughter echoed from porches and backyards. The town had always been peaceful, but now it felt different. Lighter, like something broken had quietly been put back together. And at the edge of town, behind a white picket fence and a winding gravel driveway, Ethan's backyard had changed completely. What used to be a simple lawn was now a sanctuary. Sophie had painted a wooden sign herself, wobbly pink letters on a white board, "Home for Paws." It hung proudly above a row of clean, sturdy kennels. There were shaded play zones, soft grassy patches, and water pumps that gurgled in the sun. A small shed had been turned into a grooming station, filled with brushes, towels, and vet supplies donated from all over the state. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Sophie stood beneath the sign one morning, hands on her hips like a tiny general. Her straw hat was crooked, her shorts smudged with dirt, and her smile stretched wide as she watched Hope, the injured Labrador, wander happily through the yard, tail wagging, healing with every step. Bruno lay nearby, stretched out under a maple tree. His fur had grown fuller. His eyes were half closed, but his ears twitched at every sound. He didn't run like he used to, but he didn't need to. He had earned stillness. Inside the house, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of envelopes. Donations, adoption inquiries, thank you letters. After the raid, news of what happened had spread. A regional reporter came, filmed the yard, interviewed Sophie with Buddy in her lap. Bruno sat beside them, calm and proud, tongue lolling like he knew exactly what this moment meant. Now volunteers stopped by every week, crates of food, blankets, toys. A retired woman named Mrs. Rowley, once the neighbor who scowled when a basketball bounced into her garden, now came twice a week with homemade dog treats and a thermos of sweet tea. She said Bruno reminded her of a search dog her husband once worked with. "He's got the same eyes," she told Ethan, "and more heart than he lets on." Ethan believed her. One afternoon, while cleaning out the kennel gutters, Ethan noticed Sophie standing near the edge of the yard, staring toward the woods. He walked over. "What are you thinking about?" She turned slowly. "Just remembering that night," she said. "I was scared." Ethan nodded. "But when Bruno stood in front of me," she continued, "I wasn't anymore. It was like he told me I'd be okay without saying a word." Bruno had quietly padded up beside them. Sophie rested her hand on his head. Ethan looked down at the dog. "When I first brought him home, I thought I was rescuing him." Sophie smiled. "But he rescued us." They stood there for a long time. No words, just the sound of dogs playing, the wind in the trees, and the quiet understanding that some bonds don't need explaining. Later that week, they hosted their first official adoption day. Families came from nearby towns. Kids laughed as puppies tumbled across the grass. Hope was adopted by a young woman who cried when the old dog licked her cheek. Buddy, though, he never left Sophie's side. It was clear he'd already found his home. Bruno didn't join the chaos. He stayed on the porch, watching over everything like a silent guardian. That evening, after the last guest had left and the sun painted the sky in gold and purple, Sophie pulled out her sketchbook. She sat on the porch steps and drew for nearly an hour. When she was done, she handed the sketchbook to Ethan. It showed their house, the kennels, the dogs. In the center stood a tall man in a police uniform with his arm around a little girl. At their feet sat a German shepherd, strong, calm, eyes full of quiet light. Ethan looked at it for a long time. "What's this?" he asked. Sophie shrugged. "Us and Bruno." He swallowed hard. "It's perfect." That night, moonlight washed over the yard. The wind rustled through the trees. Inside, laughter floated from the dinner table. Dishes clinked. Buddy barked once at a passing moth. Bruno rested on the porch, head on his paws. He had once been forgotten. Now he was home. And in that moment, something quiet settled in the air, the kind of peace that doesn't come from luck but from love that refuses to give up. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or fanfare. Sometimes they come quietly, limping through the rain, scarred and tired, asking for nothing but a second chance. Bruno was more than a dog. He was proof that no life is too broken to heal, that no soul is too far gone to be found. He taught a lonely father and a hurting little girl how to become a family, how to trust again, how to believe in goodness even after seeing the worst of people. We all carry wounds. We all at some point wait in silence for someone to say, "You still matter." And maybe, just maybe, that's the real miracle, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet act of being seen, of being chosen, of being brought home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you believe every soul, human or animal, deserves a second chance, say it loud. Subscribe for more stories about loyalty, healing, and the quiet power of love. Because sometimes the most broken things are the ones that teach us how to be whole.